We are now, yes.
Right, okay, so we're live.
Yes. So, hello and welcome to all our attendees this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the first in a series of short sessions that Cognition 24 and Teleios Consulting will be running jointly throughout the coming weeks. So these sessions are really focused on how we can help each other navigate through the crisis we're currently enduring and what we should be doing once the storm has passed. So, you know, how should we be supporting our customers, our people and our families? So my name is Andy Nellis. I'm the Managing Director of Cognition 24. So we're a specialist technology consultancy and we primarily focus on Salesforce and Financial Force implementation and managed services. We also have with us Chris and Kezia from Teleios Consulting. And Teleios are at the forefront of helping leaders and organizations navigate the continuous stream of choices that face them, and never more so relevant than today. So, and our guest today is Andy Bradford. Andy's a tax partner through EY, and you'll be hearing more from him a bit later on. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this webinar, so be aware of that. And as we go through, please feel free to ask any questions you may have using the Q&A window, and we'll pick up as many as we can at the end. Any that we don't pick up, we'll actually pick up with you afterwards following the webinar. So just a bit about Cognition 24 and Teleios and our partnership. So, you know, what is the value of that partnership? Well, for us, as organizations, we're both people-focused, really people-focused organizations. We really recognize the importance of both employees and customers alike. We're really familiar with how technology can adversely impact the experience of both employees and customers. So, you know, that's why our partnership is so beneficial. And my experience says that, you know, there is absolutely a common theme running across businesses that I've been had the pleasure of working with over the years, and you know, that is really the leadership of change, or really the lack thereof in general, and how that is really critical to success. So when the opportunity therefore came to form this partnership with Teleios, you know, it was one that we just couldn't refuse. So for us, it really allows us to open up the conversation around the outcomes that our customers are looking for. So how do we put change to the top of the agenda, not the bottom, and how do we make sure that's embedded throughout a program or a project? So at this point, I'd really like to hand over to Chris, and he'll give you some initial thoughts on how to survive the current storm.
Yeah, thanks Andy. And just wanted to give you just a little bit of background and context, and then we want to give obviously as much time as we can to Andy, who's going to be looking at some of the key elements around some of the financials that we're all as business owners having to face. So for the past 4 years, I've been explicitly exploring a theme of navigating in uncharted waters with both business and academia. I bring to this, firstly, experience as a former commercial ferry captain, and also as a senior corporate leader in Hewlett-Packard, where I introduced remote working and also the shift to a solution and enterprise way of doing things and doing business. But for the past 10 years with Teleios, I've been working with organizations across the world, helping them shift and reform and in some cases transform. But much of our work has been about stabilizing programs that have got themselves into difficulties. Now, given the success rate of organizations delivering intended outcomes of the change being quite low, it's clear that navigating in uncharted waters is challenging for actually many, many leaders. A few, 15%, do it well, and they really are the change-able leaders. But many have never actually developed this skill set. So much of my time through books, coaching sessions and development programs has been about reminding people that you can only navigate in uncharted waters if at first you can navigate. And we need to do much more work with our leaders in helping them understand those principles. But the good news is it can be learned. And just in the same way as I became a Master Mariner through continual development stage assessment, we can do the same in that space for the future. Now we're beginning to do some exciting work with Henley Business School around this. So the emphasis has always been on change management. And what we're finding now is there's a sharper focus being introduced around the leadership of change. So much of this has been in response to obviously all the big shifts going on previous to the pandemic around AI, big data, robotics, in what the WF are referring to as the fourth industrial revolution. And of course, then COVID-19 arrives and the world has been turned on its head. Now we're all trying to figure out how to survive, and as business owners, we are absolutely doing exactly that as well with our own organizations. And then if we make it through the next weeks and months, we need to start figuring out how we're going to then emerge from this and what that new shape actually looks like. And one CEO I was talking to this morning in Dubai has put it very prosaically. He said, maybe we can figure a new way so we don't all end up doing the crap we've done in the past, which I thought was a pithy and also a very good sentiment. So the language and imagery being used at this time draws directly from my previous role at sea. So we're in the boat together, the storm is raging, we're being hit by wave after wave as we navigate the options and choices. And of course, despite using these familiar terms that we think we all understand, in reality, many are all at sea with the actual real interpretation. So with our partners in Cognition 24, we want to join the incredible effort that's now going on and practically offer support to our friends and customers. And that support is being delivered in 3 areas. So Andy, could you bring us onto the slide? The first one, we recognize we're in the middle of the storm. This is about survival mode. So these webinars are actually going to be picking up themes which are relevant to us all, like now. So at sea, when I'm in the storm, I point the ship into the waves, I reduce my speed, I make sure everything's tied down, I make sure everything is literally as watertight as we can actually get it. And we take one wave at a time. And that's the theme that we'll be picking up in the next weeks. So very much a survival way of getting through this, these raging seas. The second element is we're working in a number of different regional localities, trying to bring together the joint effort between central, local government, between industries of various hues and shapes and sizes, from corporations to SMEs to the charity sector and the communities itself. If you want more information on that, please contact us at Cognition and we can maybe put you in touch with stuff that's happening more in your region. And the third level is to look ahead, because this storm will pass, to what we're referring to as the emerging dawn. And for that, we're bringing together a group of people that have got real authority and expertise to begin to think and feel together in a kind of a think tank kind of way, out of which will be lots of materials using various platforms. So certainly would be blogs, probably more webinars, books, articles, tools, very, very practical stuff that will help us emerge from these very, very difficult times. So today we're going to start the series of seminars which really are going to help us, I hope, weather this storm. So there's already much that's on social media, which is excellent, and we don't want to repeat lots of that. So we want to choose content and topics which are, one, very relevant, of which we can make a practical contribution to, and may not be being picked up in quite the same way as other things on social media. So today we're going to be handing over very shortly to Andy Bradford from EY to look at some of the financial things which are at our disposal. Next week we're going to be looking at the whole area of expectations from business to employee at this times, and looking at some of the pitfalls and some of the challenges. And then session 3 and onwards for a few other sessions, I think it's 4 and 5, we're going to be looking at how to keep well in these times. And my colleague Kezia is going to give you a little bit more information about those particular elements. We've also got somebody called Clive Triance, who was the former CEO and MD of large chunks of HSBC, who was directly impacted by the 9/11 disaster. And Clive is already working with FTSE 500 company boards to help them really just orientate towards that tragedy, or how he orientated towards that tragedy, and how we need to be positioning now at boards, particularly within the corporate world. And then we're also going to be picking up in later sessions the implications for the SME markets as well. So in terms of for example, technology support. We know, for example, SMEs in 2016, in terms of their technological resilience, were ranked, I think it was about fourth or fifth in the world. Currently, 4 years on, our standing is 48th in the world. So we've got a huge amount to make up within the technological area. And also we're going to be bringing in a colleague, friend, Malcolm Murray, who is the MD of the Entrepreneurs Hub, who works with business owners in the way that they grow and also sell on their companies. So that's looking more in terms of the kind of the transitioning away from the actual storm. So what can I ask Kezia to do now is just say a little bit more about the well-being, because obviously us all keeping sane and not clawing up the wall is going to be absolutely key to us all at these points. So over to Kezia.
So just from me, Kezia, just a question to you to start this off really is, so you've led and you've managed a variety of teams over the years, and along much of that been a champion of remote working. So what is it you're seeing at the moment, and how are we all going to adjust? How do we adjust to this new way of working and living?
Yeah, not easy, Andy, for many of us. I think firstly to say that there are a number of requirements of employees at the current time, most of which aren't new to us. Things like, communicating and connecting with your teams, supporting and motivating your team, and managing performance. So these things aren't new, but what is new is this recent acceleration of remote working. Now, for seasoned remote workers like myself, I'm reasonably quite comfortable with that. But for many of us, this is new, or they've only done bits of it. So it brings up a number of challenges and indeed opportunities. But to answer your question in terms of some of the themes that are coming up, I think one of the things that I'm hearing a lot over the last couple of weeks is the requirement for people to take on new and multiple roles. And an example of that is the mum who's now, not just a parent and employee, they're also a teacher, they're also, a local volunteer, and actually the blurring of those roles. So, and that's something that, we'll look at in more detail in the future webinars. I think there's also the impact on this situation for families, both positive and negative, and we'll also have the opportunity to look at that in a couple of sessions' time. And the real importance of you're maintaining your physical and mental health. As Chris said, we need to get through this really challenging time. So starting next week with the session with you, Andy, and Chris on team to manager, manager to team, we'll start to touch on those areas. And then in session 3 and session 4, we'll dig deeper into some of those themes.
Great. Okay, thanks, Kezia, for that. I'd now like to hand over to Andy Bradford from EY. So Andy is an associate partner at EY, the accounting and consultancy firm we probably all aware of. He's normally based in London. He specialises in tax and works with a number of clients across varying sectors and of varying size. So he's just going to share a bit about his experience with his clients in terms of how they're dealing with COVID-19, and looking a bit more detail at some of the UK government stimulus measures that are now available to us as businesses, employers and employees. So over to you, Andy.
Great, thanks, Andy. It's great to be with everyone this afternoon. So thanks very much for having me. Keisha, I recognise much of what you're saying. I was an avid Joe Wicks follower for about 4 days, but that's dropped by the wayside. So I need to get back on that, I think. I'm sure I'm not alone on this call with that. So yeah, thanks for having me. I work at EY, as Andy said, big international firm. You may be aware of it. And I guess, you know, when I was asked to come and talk on the call, I was thinking, what's the best thing to share with this audience? And I think at the heart of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, in the way that I've been dealing with it with my clients, and that EY has been dealing with it internally and externally, has been a kind of a personal and individual human response at its foremost. And I think there's maybe something that's reflected across different communities across the whole of the UK and across the world. And I just wanted to kind of reflect on that, on my interactions with clients and what clients have been saying to me in the last few weeks, share that with you, and also then look at some of the government stimulus measures that are so important to businesses right now, and just kind of give some context around those, and we'll have a deeper dive into 2 or 3 of those. So next 10 minutes or so, I'm very happy to take questions if we don't cover them. So how's EY looking at this, and what's the kind of the framework for the discussions that I've been having with clients? And this is a model that's been built up through those discussions with clients, and it's all about being about resilience. You'll recognise that term, I'm sure, and feel it in the way that you're going about your business at present. So it's all been about resilience in the last few weeks. I think that will continue for the next few weeks, but we are also now starting to see people's moving beyond this and looking at respond. And in EY terms, regrowth or resurgence. So everything beginning with R. We're not business advisors for nothing. But I'm going to focus on the resilience aspect of this today, and just quickly run through some of these headlines, these 4 pillars of what kind of underpins how a business is facing up to resilience and what our clients have been saying to us. There's a next slide, which we'll move on to shortly, but not just yet, Andy, but that gives some details of examples, if you like, of behind each of these headlines, so which I'll just touch on briefly towards the end. But essentially, first reaction has been a people and society response. So how do businesses and individuals protect the welfare of employees and those around them, and continue to contribute to the response to COVID-19? So issues around how do I understand people's needs? How am I going to enable people to work remotely? How am I going to enable them to be ill and to cover them when they're ill, etc. So they're kind of very much a very first response around people and society. Moving forward from there, discussions and insight around, okay, what does business continuity look like for me in this kind of new world, in this new normal, which we'll hear talked about. You know, how do I keep my customers engaged? How do I continue to communicate with customers and suppliers? How do I protect my brand? And do I need to change the way that I do business? What's my business continuity? So at a very high level, you'll see that with supermarkets, you know, used to selling stuff to people on shelves, increasingly pressure on them to do home deliveries. So they've had to flex very quickly around the way that they do business. I was talking to a client yesterday who makes cereals, and they've had a 30% increase on people buying breakfast cereals because people are at home and they're having more breakfast at home, and so they've had to upskill or uprate their supply chain in order to meet that demand. And now they're looking at the future and saying, okay, so when people start to go back, when these social distancing is lifted, what does that mean for me? How do I start to manage my business then when I get a 30% reduction and people start going back to just having a latte or a bottle of water on the way into work? So lots of flexibility needed around continuity and how businesses deal with that. Also then, really important to continue to look at financial viability, and I'm going to focus in on this one shortly when we look at the government stimulus measures. So this is around scenario planning and cash control. You know, do you need to reduce costs? Where can you reduce costs? Am I making sure that all my bills are out on time? And am I following those up and having discussions about whether they're going to be paid? Some real discussions about how that works, how you best do that, and do it in a responsible way. So you'll see, you know, kind of good examples of this, and you might see some bad examples of it too. So if I was to refer to the last few days and the discussions around the Premier League and the way some of the footballers have been portrayed in the press about not contributing to the COVID response, at the same time as their clubs are furloughing employees, maybe not so good. And you'll see other examples of that: stores that maybe try to stay open, or leaders in businesses not being great with their staff and putting mixed messages out in the market. So at the same time as managing financial viability and having a really open communications, our clients have been really concerned about doing that responsibly. And I think that's something that hopefully you guys can reflect on in the way that you're doing your business, but also there may be some opportunities in this as well for the way that you react and the way you change your mix of how you approach the market, your markets. And then finally, flexibility around that. So managing the situation. Talking to a chief exec yesterday who was saying, do you know what, I feel a bit better this week because I feel like I'm managing things on a day-to-day basis rather than on an hour-to-hour basis. And that'll become increasingly the case. And I think that's something that we all aspire to, but keeping agile and keeping those lines of communication open are really important. So Andy, just very quickly, we'll just flick on the next slide if that's okay. So this gives some examples of issues behind, or areas to consider behind each of those pillars, which I hope you find useful. I hope you find useful for you to reflect on your business and the way that you're going about your work. But also in here, I do think there's some opportunities. So for instance, if you're in the an outsource, if you can help a business with their outsourcing constraints or shared service constraints, could you help people with brand if you're in that sector? Can you help them with well-being, the sorts of stuff Keisha was talking about? So I think there's opportunities in here because businesses are crying out, certainly at this stage, for communication around these issues. So they'll be very happy to talk to you about these sorts of things, as we all are, I think. But there may be opportunities and maybe reflections on how you might approach these in your markets. But let me move on from there. That's the kind of general context. And if I move on, if that's okay, we'll just spend the next few minutes just talking through the UK government's response, because you'll have read a lot about this in the press, but I just wanted to kind of hone in on a few. So it's kind of unprecedented UK government response. I think most governments around the world have responded in an unprecedented way. These are novel times for the way that governments have responded and the finances and help that's available for businesses. If you reflect that the Chancellor was stood up in the beginning of March and announced a budget that was around about 30 billion giveaway. It was one of the largest budgets in recent memory to fund things like HS2, etc. 3 weeks later, he was standing up and announcing 400 billion plus package. So a kind of 10 times increase of what was announced in the budget to help businesses through this situation, unheard of. But what the government's trying to do is provide liquidity, usually through financing schemes, and usually they're available through the banks, helping employees to protect jobs. That's commonly seen as the furlough position, a new word to us all, sadly. Helping businesses move fixed costs, and we'll talk about one of those around rates, and then cash flow help, including tax deferrals, admin help. For instance, if you have audited accounts, you don't need to have those signed off in the current period. So smaller things, but do help businesses just focus on their business and not on the admin. And then benefits entitlement due to individuals who, which is available through the benefits system. So 6 or so areas being focused with unprecedented speed, unprecedented cost to the government, and funds available through three systems. Let's just look at some of those in a bit more detail, Andy. So I've listed pretty much them all out there. These are the headline ones, but I'm only going to focus on a few of them. The first one is the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. There's 2 various schemes in this one for larger businesses and one for smaller businesses with turnovers up to 45 million per annum. This is a loan scheme which allows businesses to get unsecured loans up to £250,000 through their bank. Much less process required. There was initially quite a bit of process, and the Treasury admitted they got it wrong. In fact, I think yesterday the Chancellor stood up and said, "We got this wrong. We'll ease things around how you get these loans." So less security required. You do still need a kind of a proposal for why you need the loan and how it's going to see you through and what you're going to use it for. But up to £250,000 available much more easily through the banks, which is a loan. So still repayable to the banks. But the government is underwriting the loan to the banks, so the banks are feeling more confident about giving those loans out. Definitely something that many businesses are making use of and worth looking into. The second one is tax deferrals. This mostly falls into VAT. VAT being a transaction tax, it's more immediate than many other tax measures because it's coming up, it's kind of on a real-time basis. So if you're VAT registered, then your VAT liability that's due, your payments due to HMRC in the next quarter will be deferred until the March 2021. Lots and lots of businesses have made use of this as well. You don't need to apply for it, but you do need to cancel a direct debit if you have one with HMRC. You must cancel that, and you must reinstate it again afterwards. This is one of those things that many of my clients have said, yeah, we're definitely going to do that. So lots of take up on it. The big trigger with this is to remember that you've done it, because you don't want to get to March 2021 and have a big cash flow hit. So to remember you've done it and then find out a way to pay going forward. HMRC also opened up many discussions around time to pay. So if you're struggling to pay this or any income tax or personal tax liabilities, you can speak to HMRC and they'll be open about discussing that with you. They've geared up call centres, taking people off the front line and put them into call centres to enable them to do that. I know they're not perfect, but believe me, these things have moved. This would have taken years and years to set up in a normal circumstance, and they've done it in weeks. Just wanted to cover down the job retention scheme. This is the furloughing thing. So this is allowing paying up to 80% of the government paying up to 80% of an employee's wages if you put them on a furlough situation. You have to do that in writing with the employee, and the government will cover up to 80% of the salary up to £2,500. This came into play for anyone who's on a PAYE register from 1 March and is initially for 3 months, could go on longer. It's kind of open-ended for now. It'll be claimable through an online portal. That's not up and running yet. It should be by the end of April. So you may find that you're paying somebody who's on the furlough for this period and not actually getting your money until the end of April to cover the cost. But it will be up and running, and it's been well received. Lots of businesses have made use of it. You'll have read a lot about it in the press. The communication around it hasn't always been great, so just make sure that that is the case if you're going to make use of it, that you're communicating with your employees and doing it under their normal employee law rights, etc. Employees can't work for you while they're under furlough, but they can volunteer for other scenarios. So and other work, for instance, volunteering to help with the NHS response. So and then one final thing, you can't make them redundant while they're under furlough either. When the furlough is finished, then that's back under discussion. So that was that one. And then finally, the small grant. Business grant funding. I just want to cover down there, bottom left of your screen, and that's this is a grant, not a loan, so it's not repayable. But if you're in the small business rates relief scheme, then you're eligible for a grant of £10,000. If you're in a retail hospitality sector, then your grant can be up to 15,000, and even there's a 25,000 grant for that sector as well. Again, really worth looking at if you're in those sectors. These are grants, not loans, so not repayable, but you'd need to be proactive to make use of them. So let me just bring us to a close, Andy. 4 things I just think to stress to you guys. It's really important to keep up to date on these things. They're changing by the day. There's a charities one issued yesterday, for instance, so changing by the day. You've really got to proactively manage them. They won't come to you. You have to reach out and get hold of them and make use of them and say that you want them. It won't just be applied to you. Consider your need against constraints. There's a little bit of, how you manage employees, for instance, how you manage, is it possible to really have open discussions with employees under furlough? What will clients, customers, suppliers think, etc.? And then track them, keep an eye on them. Just don't forget that you've taken them where there'll be repayment further down the line. It's important not to just forget that this is a one-off and get caught up in running your business, which understandably you will do. And then one final giveaway. Not many things that EY gives away, I have to say, but one thing we are giving away. There's been these stimulus measures in 168 countries. To quote a US president, I didn't even know there were that many countries. But we covered many of those in this tracker. You'll see a page for Spain there, but there's about, I think, 50 or 60 in this tracker. If you log on that link, you'll be able to get access to it. It includes the UK and includes all the details of how you apply, what they mean, and some of the extra things that we've talked about. under the UK and every other country that certainly in and around the UK. Whew, that's a whistle-stop tour, but I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Very much appreciated and very informative, and hopefully that's been of help to people on the call. So at this point, we're going to open up to a few questions. We do have a couple that we've had asked prior to the session. Andy, these are really focused towards you, I think, around. So which employees are eligible to be furloughed?
Okay. So they must be on the PAYE payroll, and they must have been on that payroll on the 28th of February. Apart from that, anybody who was in that situation, so full-time, part-time, contractors, as long as they're on the PAYE payroll on the 28th of February, you must notify them in writing, and you must be aware of any other employment law that's covered under a normal contract.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, and I know you touched upon this earlier, but there's another one around the likely time gap between paying furloughed employees and being compensated by the government. Yeah,
so we're seeing a bit of blowback that now in social media at least about put employees on furlough, but when am I going to be paid? You'll be making a claim every 3 weeks. That should start at the end of April, but it's reliant on this online portal being set up. I know that's been worked on, so you'd hope that that's out very soon, and then you log on to that. You're paid in that portal. You'll be asked to put your bank account details in, and obviously your tax registered numbers, etc. And then you'll be paid by backs from the government. Okay. So it's to be end of April, and then you claim which is the first payment, and then it should be every 3 weeks.
Right. Great. Thank you. And just one final thing. So, do you have you heard anything around EY's view on what is likely to happen to the economy? Obviously, lots of speculation.
Yeah. It's really difficult, isn't it? So there's lots of information, but nobody we're auditors, right? So we sit on the fence as much as we can. I think maybe the thing to say here, without getting into too much detail, I could talk for it all afternoon, I guess. But the thing to do is the things you'll hear, I think, are V-shaped response. So how does the economy come back? Is it in a V shape with a very quick response? A U shaped, so it takes longer at the bottom and back out. A W shaped, so we start to recover, but then it's really bumpy. Or an L shaped, so it down and then kind of bumps along the bottom. I think you'll hear more and more of those things in the coming weeks. The view from EY is it's all dependent on the medicines, because until we get a medical response, it's really hard to predict the economics around this sort of thing, but more likely to be U-shaped than V-shaped. So we're not completely bullish about this. If it is U-shaped, then I was on a call yesterday where they said we're talking about a 16% drop in GDP, which is the kind of thing that's used to measure a size of economy. We were going along at about 1% growth. When we had the financial shock, to give that some context, when we had the financial shock in 2008-9, it was a 6% drop in GDP. So 16% drop. And then a recovery, and if it's U-shaped, depending on the medicines, then EY would say we'll start to get back to round about where we are now towards the end of 2021. So not easy, certainly not easy to predict, and definitely dependent on the medicines, I think.
Okay. Right, thanks for that. I do have one more question from Annabelle. How should employers manage pension auto-enrollment for furloughed employees? Is that one you've...
Can I take that away? Do you mind, Annabelle? No. Sorry, I'm very happy to come back to you. There's definitely some interaction between furloughing and pensions and the auto enrollment question. But let me, rather than me speculate and kind of come up with something that's wrong, I'll take that offline if that's okay. We'll come back to you. Come back through Andy or one of you guys.
Great.
Hope that's okay.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Very much appreciated.
That's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Good luck with these. Sound great.
Thank you. So just to kind of update you, so as Chris alluded to earlier, we're running a number of these week on week. So the next one is next Thursday at 1 p.m. same time as today, and that's around how managers work with teams and vice versa. How do we make sure that everyone's in sync and healthy and clear during these times. So if you want to register for that, the link is down below. Otherwise, it just falls to me to say thank you very much for attending. Thanks to Andy Bradford as a guest and giving us some really great insight into the current tax stimulus from the government. If there's anything else that anyone wants to ask, those are our contact details. Please feel free to reach out and we'll distribute the questions to the relevant place accordingly. So yeah, once again, stay safe, have a good rest of the day, enjoy as far as you possibly can the Easter weekend, and hopefully we'll look forward to seeing you on our session next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.